Hey everybody, it is Kat with Tastemakers, and I am here with one of the incredible makers who we covered in our second season, Lauren Blum from Bløm Meadworks in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I was really excited to reach out and catch up with her today because we're right on the edge of spring and it's getting to be growing season. And one of the things that really attracted me to the Bløm story is not just that they make mead using local honey, but that they partner, very specifically with local farmers for all of the wonderful things that they use to infuse flavor into their meads and their cysers. So thank you so much for joining me, Lauren.
Thank you for having me. It's so great to see you again and kind of relive our moments from what now feels like 100 years ago.
It definitely does. And so Lauren's going to show us a really amazing cocktail that you can make with her mead. We're going to taste a little bit during this happy hour. But before we do, just kind of give us a snapshot of what this past year has been like for you and how you guys have kind of like stayed afloat.
I would say in some ways we're fortunate. We're still here. We're still open, and it's seeming like we're going to get through this, which I'm just feeling really good about. I know not everybody's in that position, and it certainly is kind of, dicey week to week, month to month. Like everybody else, we've done some major pivots. So what was our bustling tap room and tons of in-person conversations and talking about meads, talking about ciders, talking about the farmers we work with, has really kind of turned into, for the most part, contactless way of distributing mead and cider. So here in Ann Arbor, folks can do curbside pickup. We're doing local delivery once a week. We do have a patio with some heated huts. Fortunately, Michiganders seem to be pretty hardy. We've had lots of people come out and full snowsuits and sit on the patio during snowstorms. So we're trying to make the best of it. We've been selling groceries from local farmers or things that we don't normally sell. Lots of kits and packages to just try and send a little joy home with people. We launched some subscription kits where you can every month you get a little bundle and it has a surprise selection of Bløm drinks, and then one of those has a board game, one of those has some self-care products from other, Ann Arbor businesses, all kinds of stuff. I feel like we ourselves personally have noticed that the little things kind of matter right now, and food and drink are a good way to kind of bring a little joy right now, and not a lot else is accessible. So we're trying to get that to people when we can.
Absolutely. And in the heart, well, one of the pieces, the tip poles essentially of your business is collaborating with people in your community. And I really feel like this whole COVID period, this past actual year, has really kind of opened people's eyes in a way that maybe they didn't really understand before, the importance of those local connections, the fact that you can rely on those farmers, your neighbors, and that you have this local regional food system that is healthy. That is something, I think that is more important now than ever.
It has put such an incredible spotlight, I think, on the strength and the important redundancies within our local food shed. At times when other things weren't available, or manufacturing was down, or shipping was down for lots of reasons, our local farmers in the Ann Arbor area and really throughout Michigan stepped up in ways that were, I actually have goosebumps talking about this, that was so inspiring, so incredible. There's a little shop called Argus Farm Stop here in Ann Arbor, and they piloted this project to kind of be a year-round farmers market where farmers sell goods directly through them. But you walk in, it looks like a little store, but everything is produced locally. And they had to rent 2 huge refrigerated trucks to sit outside because they were selling so much, especially during those first 6 months or so. Farmers stepped up, and their chain is so much shorter, and so there were so many fewer opportunities for things to fall out or things to drop off. So if a farmer is healthy and they're growing and they're delivering it directly to the place where you're buying it, chances are you're still going to be able to access it when we're going through something as horrific as this.
Amazing. That's incredible. And so we talked about the fact, first off, let's also back up a little bit. Mead is essentially, it's the oldest fermented beverage, and all it is at its most elemental is honey mixed with water that's allowed to ferment. And so, you really pride yourself on partnering with a lot of local apiaries, but you guys are actually on Matt's family's farm. Aren't you growing? Are you like doing some beekeeping of your own?
Yeah, well, we aren't doing it. Although we've kind of been, I would say on a very small scale, learning from apprenticing under this beekeeper. But yeah, there are 3 main beekeepers that we work with in Michigan. One is on the east side of the state, one's on the west side of the state, and one is kind of has their hives in a corridor that runs north of us up to about mid-state. And we have found that most Michigan beekeepers really try to spread out their hives so there's enough, foraging opportunity for those bees. And so that beekeeper, the one that's kind of in the middle, took, I think, maybe 40 or 50 hives and put them on Matt's farm in an area where, we have a small orchard. There's another person who's been growing some hops out there. And I mean, 1, it's really cool to learn from him, but 2, just what an opportunity for us, because it's such an important ingredient for us to really kind of be in tune with that rhythm that beekeepers are going throughout the year. So, if he gives us a call and lets us know he's going to be out there getting the hives ready for winter, we'll usually try and hop over there and at least see what that looks like for him, maybe help out a little bit if we can. It's been super cool to just see that in action all the time.
So fun. So actually, I have your standard mead right here with me. Show everybody that awesome packaging. You guys are so good at branding. And then I also have the cizer. Now, tell me what the cizer is. Remind me.
Yeah, so a cizer is, being this ancient beverage, mead has all of this language around it that's developed, and there are specific words to describe types of mead. So a cizer, the word really means, it's a generic term for mead and cider fermented together. So, the ratio might be a little different, but roughly half of your fermentable sugars are coming from honey and half of them are coming from pressed apples. And they actually get fermented together in one vessel. So rather than fermenting a mead, fermenting a cider, and blending them, you're putting it all together and fermenting it into one.
I just opened it during our happy hour. I have to taste it.
Yeah.
The combination of those, I love ciders and I love meads like separately. And also for the folks watching at home, I'm sure that you watched the episode that we did on Bløm, but in case you missed it, Bløm really approaches mead in this wonderfully modern way where it's sessionable. So it's not highly alcoholic. You keep the alcohol level kind of close to beer, like 4 or 5%, but then you also carbonate it.
Yeah. So traditional mead, like you said, mead at its most basic level is just honey, yeast, and water fermented together. Traditional mead tends to be quite sweet and or high in alcohol, so maybe 12 to 14% sweet. It almost sometimes has like a thick texture to it because there's so much honey added during fermentation. But that's not to say that's the only way of fermenting honey. So we add less honey per batch and ferment it out. So it comes out between 5 and 7% alcohol. It's carbonated. And we usually ferment it completely dry and then sometimes back sweeten a little bit depending on the flavor, but we don't have anything that really gets past maybe medium in terms of sweetness. This one's kind of interesting because you just have like a light cider note to it. So that standard, which we'll talk about, is just honey, yeast, and water, and it's back sweetened a tiny bit with honey, but it's really light and kind of floral. Honey itself doesn't have any natural acidity to it. It's so sweet. I mean, if you're thinking about honey, it's really weird to imagine it without the sweetness, because that's really what we taste, right? We get some floral elements of flavor notes, but it's so much about that sweetness. So then drying it out is really interesting. When we ferment the cider and the mead together, we get a little bit more acidity to it from the apples. So it adds a little bit more complexity, but keeps it really light, really kind of delicate.
It's lovely. And I'm sure that you obviously are sourcing your apples locally as well. I mean, Michigan is kind of apple central, isn't it, in the fall?
We have a lot of apple production here. Again, like every other crop, it really varies based on the year. Some years farmers have a great crop and, you know, it's total bumper year. Some years it's a little tough, but so far we've been able to find as much cider as we need here in Michigan. And we use a couple different orchards, apple growers that we work with. One of them is upstate in the northern part of Michigan, and they do, you know, just kind of an interesting blend of apples, and they press it into totes for us, blend it into totes, and then we freeze it and use it throughout the year. Spring is coming and we're so excited because it's the growing season, but because we source everything from Michigan, we do spend a lot of our time thinking about what we're going to do over winter. We have this long period where not much is growing. So they press in the fall, and, you know, then we have it throughout the year. And then some of the batches where we really want this intense focus on the apples, we're not adding any other flavors, maybe we're not adding any sweetness back to it. We would just want this like really incredible highlight on the apples. There are a couple of orchards that we work with who will do a custom blend of apples, and those orchards are trying really hard to grow some cider specific varieties of apples. So apples that have a lot of tannins, maybe more acidity. They're usually ones that are terrible for eating. You take a bite and so there's not a lot of sweetness to them. They're maybe like super tannic in the skin, but they make really interesting ciders. So there are a couple ciders that we do where, I mean, that is fully in focus. And so we try hard for those to make sure that it's a blend that has some of those interesting cider varieties. We've tried planting our own cider apple orchard. We planted about 120 trees, and there may be 60 left. The deer did a lot of damage, but hopefully in a few years, some of them will have survived and we'll have some of our own apples to work with too.
Well, and this is a perfect segue. So we're just at the beginning of spring. We're heading into rhubarb season. Kind of tell me what you have on tap, you know, for kind of your spring flavors, and also talk about how you infuse flavor into your meads and your cysers.
Yeah, so spring is an interesting time, especially in Michigan, because there are some early kind of harbingers of spring. We have rhubarb here, which is, I mean, you don't eat rhubarb if it's not in the spring. I mean, and when it comes in, you eat it in everything, right? You're making like pies and galettes and crisps and everything else with rhubarb. It is one of my favorite flavors. We get our rhubarb from a grower up on the Leelanau Peninsula, which is north of Traverse City in the Lower Peninsula. His name is Alex. I don't even think his farm has a name, but he's tending to his grandpa's rhubarb patch that's 100 years old and is so productive. I don't know how he does it. I don't know what kind of magic he works into those fields, but it's just this like these rows, super long rows of just abundant rhubarb. So he just harvests it, throws it in the bed of his truck, brings it down here, and then we chop it, freeze it, so it breaks down a little bit and is easier to juice. We juice it and add it into one of our meads. So it's kind of minerally, kind of earthy, and really tart, which is right up my alley. The other things that are coming in spring here, scapes, you know, there's some other things coming up, but they're pretty savory.
Yeah. How do you incorporate that into mead?
I don't know. We haven't done that yet. So a lot of early spring, and I think this is true, right, with how we're eating. If you're trying to follow the seasons or buy your things from local farmers, that early spring is still a little bit of a tough time. So one of the batches that we're putting together, we foraged some sumac last fall and let it dry. So we're working on a sumac cider. We have some chokeberries from last fall that we're drying out and pressing for a batch. So we're still working some of those things that we prepared from last year. And then we'll start to get into heavy summer season here. So we'll have strawberries and basil,
Ginger.
Ginger. Ginger here gets harvested in, you know, like September, October, and is a really finicky crop. So we're always just really hoping that one will come through in the fall. But yeah, I mean, big, bold, juicy summer flavors come after that.
So fun. I mean, Lauren, that's the thing that I love about the work that you guys do, is that you have this wonderful base product, you know, that is just by itself plain is perfect. But then you really just get to, like an artist, you know, you just get to kind of say, ooh, we can access this or we can access that. And who knows what we might do with these garlic scapes, which
Yeah.
I have to come up to Ann Arbor and taste that. If you guys make a garlic mead, I think that is that's pretty interesting.
I will be curious too if we decide to venture that way. We've done a couple. We made a goes mead this year, which has a salt in it.
Mhm.
There we had been trying for a long time to get our hands on Michigan mined salt, but most of it is used for industrial purposes and has additives in it that you wouldn't necessarily want to drink. But we were finally able to, and so we started making some goes meads, which are really interesting. But yeah, it should be an interesting summer season, and like you said, it's kind of fun because we have this dry product that is this palette that you can really paint over with a lot of flavors or add things to really kind of bring that out. So you were asking a little bit of how we impart flavors, how we infuse them in, and it really depends on what it is. So things that don't have any sugar content to them, like spices, we'll usually add in post fermentation. So we'll let that mead or that cider ferment out completely, and then we'll add in those spices, maybe in like a mesh bag or in a basket, and let it infuse flavors. Things that have some sweetness to them, or some sugar content to them, like most berries, apples, things like that. We're often pressing them and adding it, and we want to do that during fermentation so that that fermentation can pull out that sugar as well. And then depending on the fruit, we decide whether we also want to add in, like the pulp or the skins of it or the peels or things like that, if they have flavors or color that we want to impart as well.
So fun. I love it. Okay. You also can make cocktails with these meads and ciders. So what are you going to make for us today? Because it looks like we're going to have something citrusy.
Yeah, we are. So for our cocktails, we don't stick to all Michigan ingredients, just so we can mix it up a little bit. I opted for this to make one of our kind of shandy style cocktails. So we do here make one high alcohol mead that's really dry. It's about 14%, and we use it as a cocktail base. But I wanted to make a cocktail that could be made just with our 4-pack, so that if people are not in the Ann Arbor area and you do want to order a 4-pack online, you could do that and still make this cocktail at home. So the mead that will be going into this cocktail, and when I say shandy style, I mean that the base alcohol in it is something that's pretty low in alcohol. So we'll be adding maybe 10 to 12 ounces of this standard style mead, and that's only alcohol. So it's great for, spring, summer, you're outside, you're having a barbecue, maybe you're going to have 2 or 3 cocktails. No big deal. You're looking at maybe 4% alcohol, maybe 5% alcohol. So really light, easy drinking. So we're going to make Bløm Julius, which is a cocktail that I love. And to be honest, I was kind of turned off by when we first started talking about it. I don't know if have you had an orange Julius?
A million years ago.
Yeah, me too. And I think it was really sweet, kind of creamsicle-y thing. So yeah. An orange Julius, which was served at Orange Julius, had, I think, orange juice concentrate, vanilla, milk, and sugar. So it's kind of this like orange milkshake. Good, but I think maybe like if you lose that kid-like sweet tooth, it becomes a little bit too sweet sometimes. So this is kind of a riff on an orange Julius, but we're making it a little bit more acidic, a little bit bitter, less sweet, really kind of balances it out. So like I said, I was like, oh, riff on an orange Julius. I'm not sure. And then I tried it and fell in love with it. So things that are going into the orange Julius if you're making it at home. You would need 1 can of the standard mead. And again, this just has the honey, yeast, and water. This one's semi-dry and it's 6.4% alcohol. You'd need orange bitters. We're going to use 1 to 2 dashes of orange bitters, depending on how bitter you like things. We'll be using orange juice, and not a lot of it, 1.5 ounces per drink. So it is, like 1 orange usually comes out to about 1.5 ounces. So it's feasible to juice this fresh. And then lemon juice will need 1/2 ounce. So, maybe half of a lemon that we're going to juice. And then a vanilla simple syrup. So this is just a plain simple syrup, which is a 1-to-1 sugar to water. So you would, heat up that water, add in your sugar, just heat it and stir it until it's dissolved. And then for a vanilla simple syrup, you're adding 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract for every 8 ounces of simple syrup. One thing I love about simple syrups, they stay good in your fridge for a really long time. They also hold up pretty well in the freezer. So if you do want to make a little bit larger batch, sometimes, especially at home, we'll make maybe 16 ounces of something and freeze 12 of them, and then just kind of pull it out in batches as we're ready to use it. I will say as a COVID note that I love the intricacies of a really good cocktail, but not everything is available right now. Not everybody has the means to go to a grocery store. If you have just orange juice in a box or you have lemon juice in a jar, use that. It's totally fine. And you're still going to make a great cocktail. It might taste a little bit different, but the point of this is to, do something fun, use what you have, and just kind of make the best of it. So don't feel like you have to be tied to fresh juicing an orange. If you don't have one, that's okay.
All right, cool. Show us how it comes together.
All right, so I'm gonna make it in a Bløm glass. These are 13.5-ounce glasses, but really any like standard style water glass or tile, even like a Tom Collins glass would work well. You're gonna add 1 to 2 dashes of bitters. So this one happens to have an eyedropper. But if you have the regular style that has kind of that like restrictor on the top, when you're doing dashes, you want to do 2 big shakes. So 2 dashes is not 2 drops. You want to do 2 full shakes into there. So I'm going to kind of recreate that with this dropper. And again, it's 1 to 2. So depending on how bitter you like it, you might want to try 1, taste it, and then add a second one if you like it. I really like it with 2 dashes of bitters in it. All right. So then we have 1.5 ounces of orange juice.
Nice.
So again, this was 1 orange that I just juiced. I have my grandma's old glass juicer. Works well enough. So I'm going to add that to the glass. All right, we need a 1/2 ounce of lemon juice. Let me make a little room here.
I love your grandma's old juicer.
It works so well. It works better than any of the, press ones that I've found. And it's really sturdy and holds up through all the abuse that we put it through, juicing a lot of citrus. So
isn't it the truth though that usually the stuff from a couple of generations ago functions the way that you want it to function, and it's really well made?
It really does. We bought an old 1950s stove on Craigslist and fixed it up, and there's nothing electronic on it. It's all mechanical. So if a spring breaks, we just replace the spring. Not everyone would love it because she's kind of a beast, but she's pretty unstoppable.
Does she have a name? Obviously she has a gender.
No, but she should have a name. I would gladly take name recommendations if anyone has them. I love naming inanimate objects, but she doesn't have a name yet. We'll have to think about that one.
Okay.
All right, we have a 1/2 ounce of lemon juice. And we're gonna add a 1/2 ounce of that simple syrup. I poured a large container of it just so you could kind of see the color. It comes out to this kind of like tea color here. All right, so 1/2 ounce. So to recap, we have 1 to 2 dashes of bitters, 1.5 ounces of orange juice, 1/2 ounce of lemon juice, and a 1/2 ounce of vanilla simple syrup.
Perfect.
I'm gonna go ahead and give that just a little stir, because after that we'll be adding the standard mead, which is carbonated, so we don't really want to stir it much after that.
This is so simple. I love that.
Yeah, there's no ingredients that would be hard to find. I think they're just proportioned really well, so you end up with this really nicely balanced cocktail.
And people get intimidated by cocktails because they aren't as familiar with the ingredients. They're like, ooh, bitters. I don't really have anything on my bar cart. What do I go and buy? How do I use it? I think that people almost feel more comfortable cooking in the kitchen than making cocktails. But I mean, showing us it's simple, and it's really just about layering flavors, just kind of like cooking.
Yeah. This recipe was put together by a friend of ours. Her name is Tammy, and she has a kind of a cocktail business here in Ann Arbor. So she leads classes and tours and all kinds of stuff. And she's also kind of lent her expertise and developed a whole slew of cocktails for us. She just has a really incredible palate. But during COVID, she's been doing virtual classes, and she sends you for each class, a full list of cocktails you could make and recommendations of what you can use from your fridge, from your pantry. If you don't have this, use this, which I think has helped for maybe people who were intimidated before, make cocktails more accessible. Because it's like, oh, you don't have a cinnamon stick? Cool, try some, maybe some cloves. It'll be a different cocktail, but it might be equally as good. And it isn't, I think it kind of releases us from feeling like we have to be so tied, maybe to a specific recipe when we're making cocktails.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to take this standard and I'm just going to top up this drink. So we're adding a tiny bit of sweetness, a lot of carbonation. I love this foam on here.
That looks amazing.
Yeah.
And it kind of looks like an orange Julius.
I know, right? It has it really a foamy look to it. It's a little bit hazy. No ice in this, so you want to start with a cold can of standard.
Fun.
So anyway, so that's the Bløm Julius. Like I said, it has a little bit of sweetness coming from the simple syrup and a tiny bit from the standard. Acidity coming from the lime juice and the lemon juice and a little vanilla to kind of give it a hint at that creamsicle, but not overwhelming.
Oh, fantastic. Lauren, thank you. And obviously we have the full recipe right here. So if you want, it's a very simple recipe, but if you want the specifics, you're going to be able to get all that info. And before we sign off, please tell me how people can get their hands on your meads and your ciders, because you do ship.
We do. So if you're outside of Michigan, go to drinkblom.com/order. So drinkblom, BLOM.com/order is, it has a list of all of the ways to purchase our products, whether you're in town, out of town, around Michigan. And there are, I think, 32 states right now that we can ship 4-packs to. So if you go there, it'll take you to the third-party website. It's called Vino Shipper, and that's who kind of processes those orders and verifies all the requirements for state-to-state wine shipping. And then we package it up and send it out to you, and it usually arrives within 2 days or so.
Fantastic. Lauren, it is great to see you, and I'm really thrilled that you and Matt have navigated this past year successfully. And I mean, I'm thrilled to know that you guys are doing well, and it's good to see you.
You too. I know I hate to say it, but there are some small silver, without this, who knows if we would have decided to do a Zoom reunion. And it is really nice to see people that we don't get to see in person all the time. So this is wonderful.
Well, cheers to you.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah.
And please give my best to Matt, okay?
Gladly, will do.
All right. I'll see you soon, hopefully. Cheers.